this is an angle, I guess. Hi. What is the lighting doing? Okay. Hello. Absolutely nobody. I am going to be repurposing this book. It's a very old book. It was rescued. Hello, Pugsley. Hi, Pugsley. Pugsley is the star of the show now. As he should be. Okay. Come here. Come here. Okay. Right there? Right there. Okay. So this book was rescued from a library. They were going to throw it away. And I was like, no, I will take it. So I took it, and I have no use for it as it is. I'm going to be repurposing this. I could make a book from scratch almost as easily as I could revamp this one, but this one exists. So let's make something out of it. The first thing I'm going to do is just remove all of the library stickers that are on it. So there's the sticker in here, there's the due date, card, slip, there's the scan bar, there's the identification. So I'm just going to try to remove all of them, hopefully in one piece. I am going to be recovering the book because I don't need the title on the spine. So if it's not perfect, it's fine. And the tape ripped, that's okay, we can get that off of there. The nice thing with this book is it's actually overall in pretty good shape. A lot of times you find old books and they're in really bad condition, but part of why I want to repurpose this is it's overall still in good shape. It's still a very solid cover. So I think it will work well as a journal, which is what I'm repurposing it to. So I have all of my stickers off, and now the next thing that I need to do is to remove the text block from the cover, and that will let me do whatever I need to do with the cover. So I have my blade. Not that long, but it's fun. Okay. And what I need to be careful to do is I want to keep the cover intact. I don't want to cut through the book cloth that's holding the spine together. But what you'll notice with this book, maybe, is that the spine is not really attached to the cover. There's that gap, which is pretty common with books. So what I need to do is I need to just cut that end page that is holding everything together. And again, being careful not to cut into the book cloth or the text block. So I'm just going to kind of hold this separate, and I'm just going to kind of chip away at it. So at the top and bottom, it's just the paper, but on the inside, kind of more towards the middle, there's a little bit of a stronger reinforcement. I'll see if I can show you here. Maybe. There's a little bit more reinforcement in here. And that really helps to kind of keep that cover attached to the text block without having to glue the spine. So you can kind of see that there. The other interesting thing is that they didn't sew the end bands on. This is kind of a false end band that they just glued on. And it's really more for the aesthetic of it. Once upon a time, when books were made, you really needed the end bands to help reinforce the spine and hold everything together. Anymore, the way that books are made, you really don't need that. Another thing, I've cut a few of these open now, that's really interesting, is they used an actual page from a book on the spine to reinforce this. I don't know why they did this. It's really interesting and very strange to me that they would do this and not just have either a standard piece of paper or just leave it at this. The fact that there's a page with words on it back here, really interesting. So yeah, that's what a book looks like on the inside. You can see that they had little bits of twine that they would have wrapped their threads around to help reinforce the spine and hold those pages together. You can really kind of see the breakdown of the signatures, which is just those pages that are folded together. They're not held in very well. This is a really old book, so the thread is probably deteriorating, and then the area around the pages where it was sewn is probably also deteriorating. It doesn't help that I just, cut into the book. So just a little bit of the anatomy of a book. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the other side so we can fully remove the text block. And once again, it's just going to be being careful not to cut into the cover. Oh, try not to cut the cover there. There we go. So obviously if I were trying to restore this book, I would be a lot more careful, but because I'm not too concerned with the text block, I'm more concerned with the cover, I'm not being super careful. And actually what I'm going to do here on the end page is I'm going to rip up some of this reinforcement from the text block because I don't need it. And I'm just going to kind of peel this away so it doesn't leave a super thick amount of paper here. Again, just because I really don't need it. So now the text block is fully separate from the cover. It's interesting, a lot of these also have little strips in here, and I don't know what the purpose of them are. I could probably look it up and learn a lot more just by kind of Googling the elements of what this is. Another thing that's interesting, you can kind of see how the adhesive is starting to break down in yellow because it's so old. Definitely not archival quality, but it was a library bound book, so it's not really intended to last forever. It's intended to last through a lot of uses. So, interesting. I'm going to set the text block aside. I will be using the pages for other things at different points. But for right now, the main thing I want is this cover. And we're also going to clean this up a little bit. So again, it's really strange to me that they used printed pages for the spine, but it is what it is. And this made a mess. Okay, phone was ringing in the other room. It's fine. So I'm just gonna clean up this cover a bit more. By clean it up, I mean just rip all of the paper out of here. The main thing that I want out of this is the boards and the book cloth, which I see a little bit of a hole in the book cloth right here. That may have been because I nicked it. It'll be fine because I'm going to be recovering this. This just saves me a lot of work in terms of measuring, getting things to line up. Does some of that base work for me, and it's, structurally very sound. So pick this apart. Still have a little bit of paper stuck in there. I think it's going to stay stuck because it's glued to the spine, which is perfectly okay. And now I have scraps of paper all over the place. All right, so now I have my cover and it's mostly together. Again, there's that little bit of a gap there, which is perfectly okay. I have the stretcher, I have the size that I want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually recover the cover with some skulls. So this was just a fat quarter that I got at Walmart, just a seasonal piece of fabric that I got ages ago. And I'm going to use this to just sort of recover and give the cover of this text a new look. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line this up, make sure it's the size that I need it to be. And actually, this is folded in half, so I want to open that up. And I want to make sure that I have a little bit of extra room on all of the edges, which I obviously do. And I will trim it down from here. All right. So then what I want to do is I'm going to glue this fabric down to the spine. But what I actually want to do first before I even do that, yes, no. I'll actually hold off on that. Never mind. What I want to do, again, glue that fabric down. I need to be careful with this. There are methods of gluing fabric down that guarantees that you will not glue through the fabric, because obviously the fabric is very absorbent and glue may sort of soak through the fabric to the other side, which we don't want. What I'm going to be doing is gluing more or less in sections, nice and slow, using not quite as much glue as I would do if I was using like paper. It's still going to be very adhesive, it's still going to work very well, but it's not going to soak through the fabric. At least that's the goal. So what I'm going to do, I have my PVA glue and my makeshift glue brush that I've used many times for glue, and I'm just going to start working through the sections. I'm probably actually going to start from the middle and then work my way out just so that I can make sure that everything stays straight and lined up. So make sure I glue right up to the edge there, at the top and the bottom, and then all the way across the surface of the spine. And the book cloth is textured, so it should hold pretty well. And then I just want to make sure that's not too thick in any given area, because again, I don't want the fabric to absorb and then have the glue end up on the opposite side. So just like that, set my glue brush to the side, and then we'll flip this over, and then just sort of press it down. I do have my bone folder here, so I will kind of come in and make sure that that ridge there really sets into that fabric. And I can go ahead and flip it over. One, this lets me make sure that my glue is not seeping through. And two, it makes sure that I can get this pressed nice and flat against the spine. Make sure that I can follow any ridges that are in the spine where the folds are. just like that. And then I can flip this over, kind of pull it back a little bit. I have a little bit of paper scraps happening here. So I'm going to clean that off, dust that off. The problems with not working on a clean surface. And then we'll just keep gluing. And actually, I want to get just a scrap piece of paper down so that I am not gluing all over my workspace. And again, I'm just kind of gluing right along those edges. And then all over the cover so that I get a nice flat sit. Then once again, I'm going to pull the fabric. I'm going to make sure it's pulled nice and tight over the area so I don't have any wrinkles. I say while there is a wrinkle. I'm just going to run my bone folder over it to get any gaps out of there. And then we'll flip it around and we'll do the other side. And once again, laying the fabric over. Make sure it's pulled tight. And just like that, the outside's recovered. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to go ahead and trim the corners off of this so that I get a nice flush corner. Obviously I have a lot more fabric than really necessary for this whole project. And that's a little bit because I do want to sort of level out and cover some of that old paper that's happening there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of look this over with my corner cutter And I'm going to try the blade. We'll see if this will cut through fabric. I don't know how effective this will be, because I know sometimes fabric is a little tough, but that seemed to work pretty well. So we'll do the bottom corner here. Missed a little tiny bit here. There we go. And then same thing for the other side. Sorry, my hand was right there in your face. And then the last corner. And then I'm going to break out my ruler and go ahead and trim the sides. Like so. So when covering a book, and it's not quite as important on fabric because it is very thin, it's more important when you're doing paper or book cloth. But you always want to do the tops and bottoms first for your turn-ins, and then you want to do the sides. This is because when you do, they're called turn-ins. If you do the sides first, it can create a little bit of a bulge on the end, and you really want that to be coming out of the front rather than the top and bottom, because that helps to reduce the wear and tear of the book. So I'm going to go ahead and get the inside glued up real good. Again, I don't want a thick layer of glue, I just want enough to hold the fabric down. But I also want to make sure that I get into the crevices so that my cover isn't popping loose in those areas either. So I'm going to really emphasize in that spine, just because I want to make sure that that crease is in there. And then I'm going to pull it down through the rest of this. And this is also where I can emphasize that corner turn in with a little bit of extra glue. Make sure that that sticks down. And then same thing on the bottom or the top. I haven't really made that decision yet. And then I'm going to flip this part up. Again, reinforcing that spine, really getting into the crevices there. And I want to do this now while it's wet because it can help to kind of stretch the fabric into place, and it helps to make sure it doesn't pull out later after some use of flipping open and closed. And then I can kind of pull the fabric out in the other directions. And you'll notice I'm wiping my bone folder off on my hand, and that is just because I'll get a little bit of glue on it because I went over the edges here. And that's just because I glued onto the cover as opposed to onto the fabric. And I just want to make sure I'm not rubbing glue all over the place. So then I'll go back into these crevices, make sure that I like how it's sitting, and then we can move on to the sides. Which, because I overglued, I won't need quite as much on the sides. So I want to make sure that I don't have any wrinkles happening here. So that's why I'm kind of playing with the fabric a little bit and sort of readjusting as I'm laying it down. And then if I miss a spot with glue, I can sort of peel it back, re-glue, and then set it back down. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Now you'll notice I'm overlapping the glue a little bit on the top and bottom turn-ins, and that's because the fabric is going to overlap. And I don't want it to peel up on the sides just because I don't want the glue on the top and bottom. And then I want to make sure I get into those corners to make sure that those corners lay flat like I want them to. Then once again, we'll peel it back, try to pull it tight, and lay it flat. I really want to push that corner in. It's not quite cooperating with me here. That's just a little bit because of the way that I cut the fabric, and where it is in terms of the grain of the threads. So it's not being super cooperative. And now my cover is covered. It has dust all over it, but it's covered. So I'm going to set this to the side to dry for a little bit. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to work on putting together a new text block. So actually, before I put it to the side, one, I need to recap my glue so that it doesn't dry out on me. But I need to measure this. This is just to make sure that my paper ends up being the size that I need it to be, which it looks like it will be perfectly fine that way, but maybe a little bit off that way. So I will be using a standard copy paper for this, but because of the size, I will need to trim down my copy paper. So the whole spine is about 7.5 inches. If I were to go with where the original end papers were, which would be the size of the original text block, which I put somewhere. I don't know where I put it. It's probably closer to about 7 inches total. Maybe just a smidget taller, but so this will sit to the side for now. I'm going to go through and fold some paper, and then we'll sew it together and we'll trim it down. So set this to the side. Make sure I don't have glue on my hands. Try to clear off this space a little bit. And then, like I said, I will be using just standard copy paper to put this together. So let's start folding. So I'm going to be doing signatures of 4 pages. So I'm going to collect 4 pages at a time and fold it in half. And I'm going to take time to make sure that my corners line up before I emphasize that crease. And then I'm just going to fold it down and call it good. So I will say used to, when I would do this, take every page and fold them individually. I'm going to adjust you here. Oh, that angle is beautiful. We're going to be at Dutch angles now. The problem with doing each page individually, one, it takes so much time. Because instead of doing 4 pages at once, which is a whole signature, you're sitting there doing each page individually, and then you have to stack them together when you could just fold them together and then they're already stacked. But you'll notice when I fold them together, they stack pretty nicely. They all fit in there pretty well. And that's because when I fold them all in half together, not all of them are exactly at the halfway point, if that makes sense. And not all of them are getting folded to the same extreme. So the pages in the middle get folded pretty tight, almost as if I'm running a bone folder over them. Whereas the ones on the outside, they're getting folded to fit to the other pages that are inside. So it all nests nicely inside of each other. So it's faster, and it generally leads to, I think, a better product. Some people may disagree with me. Some people may say you need to fold each page individually, and I mean, power to them. I like this method a lot better. And then I also tend not to use the bone folder on the crease too much. I know I just did. But that's just because I feel like it makes it a little bit harder to work with the pages. It makes the paper itself a little bit more fragile because you're essentially squishing it. I don't know, just personal preferences. We'll say it's nice to not have to spend the entire time just folding paper. It gets boring really fast. Oh. There we go. So I will say the use of copy paper is also personal preference. Same with using 4 pages per signature. A lot of it does come down to personal preference. Especially when I use copy paper, I could put quite a bit more per signature. I could probably go as much as 8 without creating too much bulge in the spine. I like 4, just kind of keeps it at a nice round number. Kind of keeps it standard for everything that I do. And then the copy paper is just because it's cheap, and this is a journal literally just for me. So I don't need anything too terribly fancy. Again, it's just for me. Let's see, I don't know how many signatures I've done. I lost track, and this bucket keeps on getting in the way. Okay. Hi, there's 2 people here, and we are at a Dutch angle. I'm sorry for that. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think I'm going to go with maybe 15. I haven't really planned out how big I want this to be yet. I think 15 signatures will be good. That's a lot of math to try to do in my brain. Okay, because 4 pages per signature, 15 signatures, that gets us up to 60 sheets, which each one of these will be essentially 4 pages. So 4 times 6 is 240. I did math. So I think that'll be a pretty good amount for a little journal. So I need 3 more signatures. 2, 3, 4. Now I can't count. Okay. So I would say hello and ask how you're doing, but I am on my phone. That's what I'm live from right now. And I can't see comments, I don't think. Maybe I can. Hey. Live chat? Okay, hi. Okay, so Chuck asked at 3:14, what am I making? I am making a book. I'm making a journal. I'm actually repurposing an old book to make a journal. Right now, I am folding paper in half, but I'm almost done with this part. This is probably the most boring part to watch, but it's part of the process. It's part of what we have to go through. I, once again, lost track. I have a squirrel brain. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. One more to go. So once again, 4 pages, fold in half. Make sure that they're lined up first. Bloop, bloop. I was originally going to print off lined paper, but my printer's not working. I might go through later with a ruler and just draw the lines on. I might not. Sometimes I'm not in the mood to deal with lined paper. So, I have 15 signatures here. Each of these are 4 pages of 8.5 by 11 copy paper folded in half. 4 pages, well, 4 pieces of paper to a signature, so that makes 8 pages or 16 if they're double-sided. One other thing I want to do, so I want to make 2 more signatures of 2 pages, and this will be for my end pages later on down the line. Some people call them waste papers. I don't know technical terms. I don't know if I'm doing any of this correctly, but it's going to be a book. So regardless of if I do this correctly or not, I'm going to have an end product, and that's all that we're really aiming for here. So get these folded up. So that leaves me with 15 signatures and 2 sets of waste papers, question mark. Try not to break that, wow. So that is my eventual spine. Right now they are obviously a bunch of loose pieces of paper. So what I want to do now is I want to make a template, right? Right. Actually, no. What I want to do first is I want to go ahead and trim these down to size before I pierce my holes. That way I make sure everything is the way I want it to be. So a little bit ago, I measured my spine. It's about 7.5-ish inches. I want my paper to be about 7 inches so that it fits nicely in the spine, which is still a little bit damp. But just to kind of give you an idea, Oh, I mismeasured something somewhere. Whoopsies. Okay. This is why we double check things. So I'm going to have to trim it down both width and height wise. So I'm probably going to do 5 by 7. Come back over here and double check this. Oh, no, that's less than 5. I went from the spine. That was my problem. Okay, so I'm probably going to go about 4 by 7. So I'm going to trim all of these down by hand, and then we'll move forward from there. So actually, with how many I have, I could break out the guillotine, but I feel like my alignment is always off when I use that. So what I'm going to do instead, do I have any clips? I don't. I do not have any clips. That's fine. I'm just going to line these up as best as I can. And again, this journal's for me. I'm not selling this, so I don't really care that much. But I am going to lay this down. My dog just ran into something. He is blind. He struggles with walking. Do I have any other comments? No. Okay. I'm going to actually grab some binder clips, so I will be right back. Excuse the pajamas. And the binder clips are really just to, well, okay, keep everything together while I'm slicing this down. And because I have waste papers on the ends, I'm not too concerned about leaving an indent. I am concerned that my binder clip just exploded. And I don't know where the other little thingy went. So I guess we'll just take this one. We're professionals here. We know what we're doing. Okay. This binder clip's a little bit small for what I need it for, but I think it'll be okay. Maybe. My dog is growling at my other dog. There we go. Okay. So is it perfectly flush? No. Do I care? Also no. What I do want to do is pencil. Pen. Pen will do. Pencil. Pencil. I just want to make sure that my line up is good, so I want to measure right around 4 inches. I'll do just a little bit over because I know that this is not going to be perfectly lined up. I want to give myself a little bit of wiggle room because I don't want it to be too small. So then I'm going to come in. Make sure that I am lined up straight. What's the matter, Ted? Yeah? You don't say. Interesting. All right. And then I'm just going to take my blade and I'm just going to start going down. And this may take a while, especially when I do this. We're getting a little bit of a deckled edge, which is fun. Are there more effective ways of doing this? Absolutely. Am I going to do the more effective ways? Absolutely not. What I am going to do now that I have a bit of a line made up is I am going to get rid of my ruler and just follow this line. What's the matter, Teddy? And we're really just slicing down. I should check. I have 3 whole people watching me do this in the stupidest way possible. Am I still at IWU? So pet peeve of mine. IWU is Illinois Wesleyan University, which I have never been to. So technically, no. Based on what you're actually asking, yes, I am still there. I have been on vacation for the past week, which has been really nice. I go back to work tomorrow, but I am still teaching and I am still marketing there, which I really love being there. I love my job. Definitely not quitting my day job, obviously. So yes, I am still there. I'm still also working on my master's degree there. I finished that in April. And then I will be moving on for another master's degree. Still keeping my job there, obviously. It's really annoying that on the phone it does not keep the chat up, even though I keep on hitting it. So if people are leaving comments, I can't see them unless I manually go up and try to read them. What I do appreciate, though, is that YouTube has made it so that you don't have to have 1,000 subscribers to do a live stream, because that was a requirement for a short while, which really impacted not so much me personally, but it did impact my job, because there were a few times where we wanted to go live from a cell phone and we weren't able to, which I understand the reasons why they did that. And obviously, as a company, they have the right to do that, but it was just kind of a minor inconvenience. We're almost there. Almost to the bottom, and then we get to do this whole thing again on the other end. I do appreciate that nobody has been yelling at me like, Kendra, you are being super unsafe with a sharp object. My finger's not under it, so good enough. Okay, it sounds like my dog is upstairs. He is very blind. I am going to walk away for like 2 seconds. Yes, it is great that I like where I work. I'm gonna walk away for 2 seconds because my very blind dog has made his way upstairs, which is not a great place for a very blind dog to be. So I will be right back. The blind dog has been rescued. He's a little pain in my butt, but he's a sweetie. Sometimes. Sometimes he's very grumpy. Okay. Is there a way to make the chat, like, stay up? Or no? Okay. Doesn't matter. We're gonna finish this side. All right. So nowhere near flush, which is perfectly okay with me. We got a lot of paper dust in here. I may come back and clean this up later, but I think for now it's good. At the longest, it is less than 4.5 inches, which is the size of my cover. So I think that will be okay. Again, I just didn't want to use the guillotine because the guillotine, it never lines up right for me. I never account for the size of the blade. It never is straight. It takes half an hour to pull it out of where it's at. That's an exaggeration. It would take me 5 minutes, which would be faster than whatever I am doing right now. But such is life. I prefer to do things in the most inefficient way possible. That is how I roll. So, double check. My height is gonna be 7 inches. Yes, because my cover is 7.5 inches. Find my pencil again. Again, I'm gonna go just a little bit over that 7-inch mark, just to be sure. Slide my binder clip down, maybe. All right. And once again. Efficiency can be overrated when you're doing hobby stuff, yes. I'm sorry, I'm very slow to respond to comments for the simple fact my phone does not show me. I have to manually go and look at them. But also, it's a thing where if I were trying to sell this particular book, I would be taking a lot more care and making sure that this was done right. But this is just for me. I have been doing a lot of writing. I hate New Year's resolutions. I really do. I think that they're dumb. Why do you need the beginning of a new year to change anything about yourself, to form new habits? But I'm also a hypocrite, and I made a New Year's resolution this year to write every night, well, at least every day. So I have this journal that I got at Barnes & Noble a few years ago, paid way too much for it because it was Barnes & Noble, but I loved it. And it was one of those journals where I looked at it and felt like I had nothing that was good enough to say to put into it, just because that's an issue that I have where it's like, if I get something really nice, I want to make sure that what I'm putting into it is good. It's something that is, you know, worth how good this item is, which is really not a constructive way to interact with materials. It's like, yes, you want to treat your materials well, but also if you're just holding out until you're good enough for it, what's the point of having it? So I have been using that one, and it's been great. It's been helpful to be using a nicer notebook, I think, because it makes me a little bit more excited to be writing. Oh, my blind dog is also a goose. He coughs a lot. Sorry, off track. So I've been writing every night, and the journal that I got from Barnes & Noble that was overpriced is now almost full. So I need a new journal, and that's part of why I'm doing this. So it's not pretty, it's not perfect, but it really does not need to be for my purposes. And again, the kind of messy deckled edge is kind of fun. I always get excited when I buy books and like they didn't trim it all the way, so some of the pages are stuck, so it feels, I don't know, a little fun and exciting. It's weird, I know, but to be able to rip them apart, and then you do get that kind of deckled edge situation going on when that happens. Hasn't happened to me in a while, but every so often you find a book that has that little mistake, and it makes it feel more personal, I guess. I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. What I want to do now is I want to make a template for my binding holes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take one of these many scraps of paper that I have. Are the pages lined in the Barnes & Noble journal? Yes, actually. So it's one of these cheesy, the light is terrible. It's one of these cheesy like dragon ones that has the little thing on it, the gilded edge, and then it also has a little pocket in the back, which is nifty. But yeah, the pages are lined. Sometimes I like the lines because it does sort of keep me on track, but there are also times where I really don't like the lines because it keeps me sort of feeling constrained, like I can only work within the lines. Sometimes when I'm writing, it's very dark, so sometimes I'll go outside of the lines. But I feel like the lack of lines will help, because if I just want to fill a page really fast, which has sort of been my goal, is to just fill a page every night, I can write bigger. But then so it's nice just to have that flexibility. And then I can also sit there and doodle if I want to. Lots of options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically cut a little bit of a notch out of this little scrap of paper, and that will act almost like a hook so that all of my binding holes are in the same spot. So basically what that means is I'm going to come in, try to keep this as straight as I can. I'll go from this end. Helps if I hold the knife the correct way. See, and this is about 8 inches, so we'll go from about here. Wow, that was not straight at all. Let's try that again. There we go. And then we'll just trim this part off. And then that makes a little bit of a hook that I can then just sort of quickly slide it into pages. So then what I want to do, I don't know why I'm getting rid of my ruler here. What's the matter, Ted? That's really aggressive. Okay. I'm in here, Teddy. Teddy. Okay. He's just going to keep doing that. What I want to do real quick before I go and grab my very blind dog is I'm going to mark out my binding holes, and I'm going to do about 1 every inch. So about 1 inch in, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4, 5, and 6. So that's my markings. And I saw that I got a comment. What's that? So your first entry in your new journal can be a record of when you made it. Yeah, it could be. A lot of what I've been writing has been poetry, and a lot of it has not been good. I never claimed to be a good writer. But it is good to be building the habit because eventually I can get better. And then also the next program that I am going into once I finish the master's program that I'm in now is creative writing. So I really wanted to start building the habit of writing so that I'm not completely lost when I go into the writing program. So I'm going to try to straighten this angle out a little bit, see how much I can get in here. That's not great. That's the scrap pile. So here's my template. So this will just hook onto the pages. I'll start with my waste papers here, just like so. And then I can line it up into the spine, and then I can take my awl at all of those points and make my binding holes. And that just kind of helps with the consistency across all of my signatures without having to sit there and use each one as the template for the last, which I used to do. I also do have a binder's cradle. I don't love to use it because I don't really understand the measurement of it, because it doesn't have a clear measurement, and I don't know, a lot of times I end up with a really, say, exploded looking back end. And I got a So I do want to say that my dog has been to the vet many times, mostly for his blindness. He does have a collapsing trachea, which is concerning, but the vet says that, one, it's very normal. He's a poodle. It's very normal for poodles to have collapsing tracheas. Right now, it's not to the point that he is uncomfortable. So he's doing fine. He just sounds like a goose sometimes, which isn't great, but we do what we can. In terms of the template, I want to make sure that I keep my pages lined up in the same way, because I don't have, while each of the binding holes are an inch apart, it's not perfectly even top and bottom. So I just want to make sure that I keep them all lined up the same way while I'm going through. But I will say Teddy is, I think, he's turning 13, I think. He's not a young puppy. So he's doing as well as he can for the health issues that he has as a poodle, as an old dog. He still has a lot of energy. He still runs around a lot. Not always a good thing when he's blind. But he's getting around pretty well. Oh, and then I think a minute ago you heard Kirby, who is our golden doodle. Very energetic dog. We were told that, well, I was told that he would calm down a lot after he turned 2. He's about 5 years old now, and he has not calmed down at all. Have you, Kirby? He just looked at me like, what? So he's still youthful, but yeah. This just took a very depressing turn in terms of like health conditions of dogs. He's a very happy dog. He loves playing fetch. It's very cute. And he has a lot of energy. So right now, all I'm doing is just poking the holes in the book. And like I said a moment ago, I'm making sure that I keep the binding holes lined up once I've gone through each signature. Because that's the important thing to keep lined up. Otherwise, the pages are going to be all over the place in terms of how they line up when it's bound. And I'm going to be up in your face with my hand because I'm going to check in if there's any other comments. Do you put the all holes right in the crease? For the most part. Sometimes it goes a little bit off just because I'm going from the inside out. So again, the question was, do I put the binding holes right in the crease? Because this is the part that is going to be in the spine. So as close to as possible. Again, I don't strive for perfection. I strive for good enough. So you can kind of see they're pretty much right there on the crease. That's because that's where I'm going to do the binding later. And again, there are a lot of methods out there for putting the binding holes in. There have been times where I have lined up my entire block together and then just taken a knife and cut through. That works too. The thing I don't like with that method is you're going through 4 layers on each one. So if you're not perfectly straight on, you might overcut into some signatures and undercut into others. It's really an inconsistent method, but if you used a tool, it would probably be better. And again, you could also use a cradle. It's what they're called, which I have one, but again, I don't really like it because it tends to blow out the back a little bit. And I mean, I'm taking my time here. I'm not rushing through this. Like I said before, I'm doing this the most inefficient way possible. Another method that I have used in the past is lining up all of the signatures like a text block and then marking straight down and then going through each one individually. Pretty much the same way that I am now, only instead of piercing from the inside out, I would be piercing from the outside in, which that works too. Considering this is going to have a hidden spine, so nobody's going to see the binding, I prefer to go from the inside out because if I do get any kind of paper blowout, it's not visible. And I saw that I had another comment. Well, are you going to show me? Okay, I bought some of those moleskin booklets to use for journaling, but I don't use them. I have purchased moleskin before. I think it's really something that they go based on their name, because they have been around for so long and they are kind of a bigger name in books. I I've had one, I think I used it a little bit, but then I lost it, which is honestly story of my life. When I was younger, I had a shoebox full of notebooks, kind of going back to writing. A lot of those notebooks were full, not necessarily full of good writing, but of writing. Some of it, I think, may have also been schoolwork. I ended up throwing it all away, and I kind of regret doing that, but such is life. But I think the Moleskine book that I had at the time was in that shoebox that got thrown away. So it is what it is. So I am more than halfway done here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more signatures. Well, 3 signatures and then the waste papers. Which the waste papers I will be sewing in, but they will be mostly used for gluing on the end papers. And that's just to help make the end papers a little bit more secure when we get to that point. You can see bookbinding is not a fast process. I am taking kind of an inefficiently accelerated method, because technically, like, that book cover should technically probably wait 24 hours, but I'm not going to wait that long. The glue dries enough to work with without any damage before then. And then more professional bookbinders will use paste over PVA glue. Main difference is paste is a little bit easier to reactivate, whereas PVA glue requires, I mean, it's glue, so it's, once it dries, it's there. And I'm definitely not going for archival quality here. And my dog is barking in the background. And now he's howling. Okay, let me go grab him again. I have one more waste page to pierce through. What's the matter, baby? You got your bed in here? Here, I'll put your bed right here. And he's coughing again. Poor guy. So my self-healing mat is dying. I'm very rough on self-healing mats, so they never have the chance to self-heal. The other side of this mat in particular has a lot of black paint on it because I was just like, I'm just going to paint on this because I don't care. I'm very bad at taking care of my things, but they're my things, so it's fine. All right. So now try to get these lined back up, and you can see all of my binding holes here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes on each one that my thread is going to go through. So now the fun part of sewing, which also takes a very long time. So I need my thread. So this is just standard wax cord. A lot of people that work with leather would probably use something very similar to this. I like that it's pre-waxed. It works well for me, works well for my purposes, and I have a needle stuck in the spool. There it goes. Personal preference, I like to use a curved needle when I sew. I just feel like it's easier to work with, but a straight needle would work for this purpose. Suddenly this has turned into a tutorial. In terms of how much thread I use, I usually start with however many signatures that I have that length that many times. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There's a phone going off in the house again. I don't want to go too much longer because if I go much longer than this, it will get a little bit unruly. It's already a little bit unruly, but we'll make it work. So I'm going to thread my needle, first try, and then I will usually give myself a nice long tail at the beginning. One, it just sort of helps me control the length. And then I'm going to throw my excess down on the ground, and my cat will probably play with it in a moment. I'm going to check my messages. Okay, I need to check, sorry. The perks of using my phone means I also have text messages that come in that don't really come through very well. Okay, that's better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip all of my signatures over, and I'm going to be starting with my first waist sheet. And I'm going to go from the inside out and see if my math works. So the first one is really just sort of weaving in and out. So I'm going to pull the length of my thread through. And then what I'm probably going to do, just so that, just so that I can kind of keep it in line, I'm going to put a binder clip over this end of my thread, just so that I'm not losing it. And I'm just going to be weaving back and forth. So right now I'm on the outside. I'm going to go to my next binding hole and go back to the inside. And I did do a live stream a while back on French link stitch, which this is very, very similar to that. Kind of a similar weaving pattern. I'm just not going to do the link. So it's not going to be quite as aesthetically appealing. And I'm grabbing all of the scraps and throwing them in here, apparently. That's what happens when you have a lot of thread to work with. I could go shorter, but I don't really like to tie thread in the middle just because I feel like it weakens it. Not that that matters too much because I tend to over strengthen everything. So I don't think I did my math right for this because this is going back inside. It'll be fine. We'll make it work. Because I should have done 5. Shouldn't have done 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop my thread underneath. From the inside, and then I'm going to poke it back through to the outside. This is not a technical thing to do. This is just because I messed up. But that'll hold it all kind of nice and tight together. Then I can bring my net signature on, making sure that I keep the holes lined up. And I will just go straight from the outside to the inside. And then I will go ahead and poke it back through before I've really pulled my thread through. And apparently grab all of the scraps again. I should probably throw them away before I do that again, but I'm not gonna. So then what I'm gonna do, and it's gonna be a little tricky to see, but I'm going to, just like the French link stitch, I'm going to loop underneath. So I just looped underneath my previous stitch, and then I'm going to go back into the same hole that I came out of. And then I'm going to go from the next hole out. And this is where it becomes more of a Coptic stitch, I think. Modify kettle. I don't remember any book terms right now. It's been a while since I've really read up on anything, so I don't remember any of the terms. The main thing is just sewing pages together so that they stay together. If you've accomplished that, you have made a book. I am not a bookmaking purist by any stretch of the imagination. Main thing that I watch out for is making sure that when I thread my needle back through the same hole, I'm not piercing the thread that's already there, because that can start to look really messy. And I certainly could have used a white thread, but I do not have as much white thread as I have black thread. So that's kind of why I'm using the black thread, because I have the big spool of it. Where's my thread going? Okay. So I'll tell you another thing with bookbinding. Main thing that you want to learn with bookbinding is what the rules are, so that you can know what you can and cannot break. Like right now, I have probably 2 or 3 different types of stitches that are happening. All of them work, and they all work together. Is it aesthetically pleasing? No, but because the spine is not going to be exposed, it's not that big a deal. Oh, nope, don't pull there. Keep those separate. So for a little bit, I will be struggling with the length of my thread. Again, I probably could have gone shorter and then just tied them in later, but I didn't really want to. And the not really wanting to is usually what gets me in trouble, but it's fine. And I made a knot that I didn't want to make, but it works. Kind of. There we go. Now it works. I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing. So, I am on the last hole of my second signature, first real signature. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the first hole of my waste paper, and I'm going to tie off this tail thread that we made at the very beginning. So, being careful not to pierce the thread, being careful to actually go into, hang on, something's not right here. Oopsies, I'm a professional. Pull that tighter. Okay, well, this is what happens when you don't pay attention, Kendra. Okay. So I made a knot that I didn't really mean to make, and now it's holding my tail hostage. So I need to untie that knot. Yeah, that's not where I wanted that to go. So we'll keep that. I have another needle. So we're going to take that tail and put it back into the hole and pretend this whole issue never happened. So now that I'm kind of paying attention to commenting, there's 3 of you here. So is it better to have an odd number of holes? I say right after I say that I'm checking my comments. It depends on the kind of stitch that you're doing. For the stitch that I was trying to do, you generally want an odd number of holes because then mathematically it adds up to where you will be on the outside when you want to be on the outside. What did I do here? Okay, I'm going to undo a couple stitches here just because something went really hokey because I wasn't paying attention. Again, the not caring is usually what gets me in trouble. When you're doing something like a Coptic stitch where you're going in and out, and you don't necessarily need to end on an in or an out, because you're going in and out of each individual hole, doesn't really matter. You can have 2 holes, 3 holes, 20 holes, but when you're doing something that you need to end, you need to start from the inside and end on the outside, you'll want to have an odd number of holes because of the weaving pattern that you'll be doing. In this case, it's not that big a deal because, again, the spine will not be visible, and there's ways to sort of work around any issues with the number of holes that you have. 5 would have been a little bit faster because that's one less hole that I need to go through, and I may end up skipping the middle hole later on just because I don't really need it. And that'll bring me down to 5 instead of 6, but we shall see. So I just looped around that bottom thread again, and right now it's a mess. But again, it doesn't matter that much because we will be going through and we won't be going through anything. I just forgot my words for a second. We will be covering the spine because it's a covered spine book. Now, the fun thing with bookbinding is a lot of people don't realize how much math goes into it, and a lot of it's fairly simple math. A lot of it comes down to measuring, actually. But my brain, I get my numbers mixed up real easily with math, so it doesn't always go well. So right there, I noticed that I pierced through the thread, so I just kind of backed my needle out so that I wasn't pulling thread through thread, just to kind of keep that somewhat clean. And then pull this thread so it's not catching that. So now that I'm inside, what I want to do is go ahead and tie my initial tail off with my current thread. And this will just sort of help keep everything in place. And then I can go ahead and take this, and I'm just going to tuck this under what I have inside here, maybe. Just like that. And then I can cut off the excess. So now I have that little tail there. And then once again, I'm going to feed my needle to the outside, being careful not to go through all of the thread that's right here by this hole. And my tuck came undone. We'll fix that in a minute. It's not that big of a deal because I can hide that tuck because this is in waste sheets. that's done. Now I have my waste sheet on the bottom and my first signature here. And then I'm going to bring my next signature in, make sure that I'm lined up. Or do I need to be the other way? So that way it looks a little bit more lined up. So I know that I need to flip my pages. Keeping those straight is a little bit of a challenge sometimes. So I just take my new signature and I go right through that first binding hole. And then it's a lot of sort of weaving in and out again. It will get cleaner as we go along. Again, I don't care about the spine on this one, so otherwise I would take a lot more care. But because it's hidden, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it just matters that it holds together. I have that knot that I unintentionally formed. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge for a while. Again, it'll be fine. So, do we have any other comments? Nope. Okay. So I'll ask again, how's everybody doing? I have 3 of you here. I've been chatting to myself a lot. Probably just making a fool of myself, making sure I'll never be taken seriously by anyone that actually knows what they're doing with bookbinding. So what I did right there was I just kind of looped underneath a previous thread. That just kind of helps to hold this together, or hold the individual signatures together, and then going back to that same hole. And it's really just going to be a repeat of that for probably the next hour or so. This is where I really need a bookbinding buddy because I am not a super talkative person usually. I know, hard to believe watching my YouTube. So it'd be nice to have somebody else that can just sort of talk while I'm like in the zone. What is nice right now, though, is all of my animals are sleeping, so it's actually kind of peaceful. It's just me with my creaky chair, I guess. I know this is super exciting watching a double chin and an arm weaving around. Yeah. This is kind of the slowest part of the bookbinding, just sitting here sewing it. There's not really a lot to say about it. I am literally just sewing paper together. It's super exciting, I know. Even as much of a mess as I am doing this with, as much of a mess as I am, I guess, it's kind of interesting to think that like this is the same thing that people have been doing for hundreds of years. Maybe not this exact method, but like people have been sewing paper together for hundreds, thousands of years. And that is how books are made. And it kind of puts into perspective why books used to be so expensive of a commodity, because of all of the time that would have gone into it. Because you figure you have to make the paper, you have to sew the paper together. I mean, we've already been here for 96 minutes, and this isn't even making the cover. We obviously redid the cover earlier, but we're not making the cover from scratch. So just sort of interesting, that little insight into the history of something as simple as a book. So I did add another signature. We've got a lot to go yet. This is not a fast process, no matter how sloppy I am with it. I will say at this point, I am not looping underneath quite the same way. So now I'm going with the previous stitch. So I'm looping right underneath the previous signature. And this is where I really like the curved needle, because it makes it real easy to just sort of slip underneath. And this is where it gets to be more of a Coptic stitch. And this is where it'll be a little bit cleaner, because I sort of settled on what stitch I'm using. Because I think originally I was going to go for more of a kettle stitch, I think is what it's called. Which is a lot closer to a French link stitch. But then I realized I didn't have the right number of holes, and I didn't feel like going back. So now we're settling more into a Coptic. Which isn't technically the right stitch for a hardbound book. But again, we're sewing paper together. If it works, if it holds the paper together, then that's what we're really looking for here. Up in the camera. Okay. So by the time I'm done with this, my cover should be dry. And at that point, we will be attaching, I actually want to put a ribbon in. So I will be attaching a ribbon to the spine. I will also be attaching my end papers to this, my text block. And then once all that's done, I will be reinforcing my spine. Basically what I'll be doing is I'll be gluing probably just some paper. Again, this is just for me, so I don't need it to be super hardcore. If I were making this to sell, I would get more of a linen cloth backing on this. But again, since this is just for me, I'm just going to glue some paper to the spine just to kind of help reinforce. That way, even if the threads break down over time, there is that adhesive helping to hold the pages together. And then once we do that, I'm trying to think where I'm at here, we'll be putting the text block into the cover and then kind of cleaning up any details that need to be cleaned up. I'm not doing anything really fancy with this. I'm not going to be painting or gilding the edges. Again, this is just for me. And I always get worried with the gilded edge that it's going to kind of chip and fade off. And it's also kind of a pain in the butt to open the book once you've painted it or gilded it, because you have to sit there and break all of the pages back apart. And you need to make sure that the pages are really smooth before you do that, otherwise it doesn't really look right, which these are not smooth by any means. So we're through another signature. Bring the next one in, flip it over, make sure that my holes are lined up how I want them to be, and then because I've looped underneath the previous signature, this is essentially being sewn with the previous 3. I just threw my needle. Okay. Will my fingers grip? Thank you. So I will say it's not technically correct for me to be picking up the text block as much as I am. Part of this is because I'm working backwards, because normally I have the spine facing me. But since I'm on camera, I'm trying to kind of show what I'm doing as much as I can. Another thing is because I'm working with bare hands, I'm not wearing gloves, hand oil is an issue. And if I were trying to be a little bit more archival and technical with this, I would be wanting to not have my hands on all of the pages as much as I am. This is just copy paper. This is just a book for me. My hands are going to be all over this anyway. I'm not worried about it. If this were like a watercolor paper, I would be a little bit more careful, because watercolor paper does pick up oils really well, and it can impact the ability to use it for watercolor paper. Yeah, this is really a low stress, low expectation sort of book that I'm making, so I get to break all of the rules. It's also nice because it has been a while since I've been able to really sit down and make a book. I was on vacation this week, and I actually took a vacation, so I was out of town. I went to Chicago for a few days, and then I got back on Wednesday. So we left on Sunday, and then got back on Wednesday. And then Thursday, after a little bit of recovery, I went to Moline, Illinois. So it's like I never really left Illinois to see a Tool concert, which was really cool. And then Friday was really just sort of a recovery day. I did make a little project. I tried to make a video out of it. We'll see if anything comes of that, if I like how I did it. I wasn't really feeling very confident in my narration. But we'll see. Maybe that will be a video. It'll actually end up being a 3-parter. I'm not finished with that project for it to be a 3-parter yet, but it's just like a little mini booklet. But aside from that, I haven't made a book in a while, just because I work 6 days a week, 5 days at the school, and then 1 day I am a piercer. So I'm only really home 1 day a week, and half the time I'm using that day for homework. But I got my homework done early today, so I'm working on a book. I will say that's not to say that I don't have any time at all. I spend a lot of my free time when I'm not doing homework or at work, just sort of scrolling through TikTok, which I know is probably not a great habit to have, but sometimes you just need to sort of numb out and watch stupid people do stupid things on the internet. Although my For You page on TikTok has been nice because it's mostly dogs. A few cats, but mostly dogs. So it makes me happy. Oh, what are you doing? So something got tangled. Just a matter of figuring out what got tangled at what point so I can pull this apart. Okay, pull my tail through. There we go. I think my tail just got stuck. That happens sometimes, especially when you're using more thread than you need at a given point. Well, like I said earlier, I prefer to work with more thread at the beginning, as opposed to having to tie it off later, and it gets to be a mess. It's already a mess. I don't need it to be more of a mess. Teddy has awoken once again, and he is walking around all over the place. So you can kind of see how since I've settled on a stitch, it's a lot cleaner going up than when it was first started. Again, it would have been a lot cleaner had I decided on doing a copted stitch from the beginning, but I didn't. I sort of settled into this, which is perfectly fine. It's like Bob Ross always said, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. I'm throwing things on the floor. It's fine. Try not to tangle myself up here. One sucky thing with using a curved needle as opposed to a straight needle is it's a lot easier to accidentally poke yourself in the face. Because I'll usually hold the needle in my mouth just because it's an easy place to put it. I don't know why I'm going back in. I don't need to do that. This is also what happens when you get too in the groove. You just sort of start doing things automatically and they're not the right thing to do. All I need to do is bring in the net signature. So tighten that up, rethread my needle. Oh, Scrappy. Oh, Scrappy. Okay, that tail's way too long. It's almost as long as the rest of the thread. There we go. Scrappy. Mostly Scrappy and Teddy are brothers, and they do not like each other that much. Since Teddy has gone blind, Scrappy has gotten a little bit more aggressive towards Teddy. I think it's just sort of like a little bit revenge. Like, you picked on me for all those years. Hey! And now Scrappy is like being aggressive. Okay. They chilled out. So I still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 signatures and 1 waste paper to go. So we're approaching halfway. Not quite to halfway. What's the matter, Ted? I'm over here, babe. Oh, what's the matter? Do tell. Interesting. Yeah? How intriguing. What's the matter, baby? Can you come here? He's right behind me. See, this is why most of the time when you see bookbinding tutorials, they're not in real time. Because it takes quite a while. Especially when you get into like grimoire wow, I cannot word. Thicker books. Big family books. Those can take a long time. But it's also nice because then you can kind of see, like, this is how much time it actually takes to do this sort of thing. Obviously, if I had a machine, there are machines that do this, it would be a lot faster, but that's also not the point of a hobby. Oh, what's the matter, baby? Why are you howling? I'm right here. Do you think you're by yourself? What are you singing? Let me go get him. Come with me. We'll grab him together. Hi, Teddy. How are you doing, baby? You a good boy? Yes. Okay. This little guy is so spoiled rotten. Yes, you are. You're a spoiled little puppy. Okay. Back to work. You want to sit in my lap while I'm sewing? Does that make you feel better? Okay. I gotta figure out where I threw my thread, where I threw my needle. There it is. Get my tangles out. You learning, Ted? You gonna make the next one? My nose itches. Okay. Do, do, do. See, I really should have just started with a Coptic. Part of me is a little bit glad that I didn't, because Coptic can get really loosey-goosey, because there's not really anything that's keeping it straight up and down. Whereas if you're kind of doing more of the weaving, it sort of holds it not just together, but straight in a line. Not that matters, because you guys saw how I cut this earlier. And it's not straight at all. Do, do, do. Okay, there we go. The other thing I have to watch for when I'm doing this and putting the thread in my mouth is that sometimes it'll get caught in my lip ring, which is definitely an interesting experience. It wouldn't be an issue if I had a closed ring, but because I had the horseshoe, it's open, things can get caught in it. Always interesting, always a fun experience with the panic of, oh my god, I am stuck. And we're tangled again. Big thing I've learned is to sort of stop and assess where all of the threads are. You can kind of test pull, but you don't necessarily want to yank anything. Right now, I don't really know where my tail is. I don't do this anymore. Why are you here? Just kind of pull things through and kind of figure out what is the hang up. And sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's just a particular portion of the thread wrapped around itself rather than two portions of the thread getting stuck. I don't know, sometimes I feel like it has a mind of its own. Boop. Boop. I have thought about doing more live streams with bookbinding. Part of it's just sort of finding a time when the house is mostly quiet, because there are 4 people that live here, so it's pretty rare that I am around when the house is quiet. But I do think it would be fun, just again, to kind of build that habit for myself of bookbinding regularly and to actually do it properly. Not whatever mess that I'm doing right now, but like actual proper bookbinding, like I did with the French link stitch. Maybe a little bit of experimentation with different ideas. Again, it's really, I want to build that habit up, and I want to get better at doing this. That way I'm not winging it as much as I have been, and actually knowing what I'm doing. But I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I've kind of thought about for a while. That's why I did the live stream of the French link stitch way back when, because I was thinking I would do this every Sunday, and then the following Sunday I was busy, and then it just sort of fell off my radar. But maybe it can be something like my writing habit, where I go into it with low expectations and then end up making myself do it. We'll see. This Coptic stitch is coming out really nicely, though. I'm really happy with it. Even though it's not going to be visible, it still looks cool. I think I saw something. Maybe. No, okay. Just my imagination. Because there's a little bit of a delay between when I do something and when I see it on my screen. And then I think it's like a message or something, because where on the screen I am located versus where the messages come up. I'm just imagining things. I'm just a lunatic talking to myself in front of a camera. Caught on my lip again. We're definitely making progress, though, which is good. we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hasn't changed since the last time I counted because I just counted. I'm getting impatient now. And I do think I'm going to need to get more thread because this is getting a little short. But we shall see. Oh, nope. Caught on the dog's ear. Okay. Nose itches. It's fine. See, the sucky thing with a live stream is I can't sit here and cut out all of this boring silence. It's just an awkward sit in silence. But we are on 2 hours of working on this project, which really isn't that long. There have been books that have taken me way, way longer than this. If I were to sit here and try to like do a dye on any of this, if I tried to coffee dye or tea dye, that right away adds so many hours. I've yet to find a particularly efficient way of doing it, because I know most people will heat it in their oven, but the oven takes quite a bit of time, and then you have all the resources of running the oven for as long as it takes to dry all of that paper, and it is not worth it. I have heard of avocado dyeing. I've never tried it, but I think that's interesting. And I think it usually ends up with more of a pink, I think is what I've seen, which is also really interesting. I don't know, I could be completely incorrect and am just spouting random things right now. All right. This binding hole's not quite as big as I need it to be to fit from the outside. So I'm just going to put my needle in the inside and then feed it through. My leg is falling asleep. I still have a blind dog in my lap. He wanted to howl so that I would pick him up. And now I'm going to put him in his bed because he's getting a little bit heavy. He used to be 5 pounds, now he's 10. He's porked out a bit. Where are you going? Stay in your bed. Time out. What's nice is I brought my phone charger over here, so you get a slightly different angle. There we go. Nope, maybe. Kind of, sort of, ish, if it, okay. Okay, it's not a great angle, but it will keep me from dying. What I love is that I named the stream Repurposing an Old Book, and probably a good 90% of the stream is me making an entirely new text block, which most people would consider as the main part of a book. Because in a lot of ways, the recycle job that I'm doing is really not using the original materials, but I'm still using them. The text block itself, I will probably be using the pages in different paintings and other projects. I may even Mod Podge some of the pages to make a cover for a different book at some point. There's always fun ways that you can use old book pages. I've also wanted to do more blackout poetry. I used to do blackout poetry all the time when I was working at the library. Just because we had so many books that were getting thrown out, and I would just grab some and look at the pages and see what kind of words I could pick out. But that was a few years ago. There we go. I keep on getting scraps stuck in my stitches. Oh, try not to make that into a knot. I said try not to. Okay. There we go. Two, three, four. Okay, so we're down to 5. We're almost there. The end is in sight. My hands are starting to get to the point where they don't want to cooperate, which leads to an instant frustration in my brain. Because then I will start to poke myself more, because I'll start to get a little shaky. And that's where a lot of times book projects take me a little bit longer, because I just have to stop in the middle of sewing. Yeah. I'm gonna power through it today, because I really want to get this project done today. I forgot to loop that around. Oopsies. Oh, why? Okay. So you'll notice right on that stitch there, I forgot to loop it under. Shouldn't cause too many complications, just a little looser up here. And actually what I can do, it won't be quite as pretty, but I can go ahead and loop underneath the signature. Try not to loop that in. I'm gonna take that thread out so it's not making a knot. So then I have that line that kind of comes through, and then I'm gonna loop it through this stitch here between my current signature and my previous one. And that should fix it. I could have alternatively just undone my most recent stitch and gone back and looped it, but I don't really want to undo anything. A little more than halfway, yes, 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 yes. It's a very slow process, even when I'm doing it the sloppy way. There's not really a fast way to do it unless you get a machine out. But like I said earlier, what's the point in it being a hobby if you're just going to use a machine for it? Because, I mean, this is, I'd say, probably the main part of making a book. There's a lot of different stitches that you can do with it, a lot of different ways that you can make it work. I think that's the other thing that's fun with bookbinding for me is there are so many different ways that you can sew pieces of paper together. Now, obviously, for a regular sewing person, a seamstress, I guess, there are a bunch of different stitches that you can do for fabric, too. But I feel like that's a little bit more expected than the ways that you can sew paper together. I don't know, I feel like before I got into bookbinding, I never really understood what went into a book. Never really understood that thread was a component of a lot of books. Books just sort of existed as a thing. And now I'm like, oh, there's a lot that has gone into it. There's a lot that went into even the making of books, because you have not just the history of books, but you have the history of paper. Which is wild. Some of the binding holes I made didn't quite get made big enough. That was because I went through very quickly, so I'm sort of re-poking some of those holes with my needle. Which from the inside's not too hard. From the outside, I have to work a little bit harder. I might have enough thread yet. All right, 4 more. We're almost there. Yeah, there we go. My chair is very creaky. It's weird. Okay. I'm going to flip that over. I got some fluff stuck in my thread. Sometimes you really gotta pay attention to what your thread's doing, because otherwise it will just sort of go wherever it wants. Is there any other comments happening? Wasn't beeswax that went into it? So I did not wax the thread. If you have standard thread, it's perfectly fine to use, or if you have like a cord, I guess, what's the word? Embroidery thread, that's the word. If you have embroidery thread, you can get beeswax and run the thread along it. Because the thread is not being exposed, I'm not too concerned with it wearing down, because the only really exposed part is going to be what's inside the text block, which even that's not going to see a lot of wear and tear. If this were an exposed spine, I might think about running some beeswax over just to protect the thread and help strengthen the bonds in it. But because I buy it pre-waxed, I'm really not too concerned about waxing my thread. I do have beeswax around, just because I do sometimes use embroidery thread, just because, you know, different colors than what comes pre-waxed, and it is cheaper generally. But I have so much wax thread that doesn't really make a difference. And I will say that, like, waxing the thread is not an absolute requirement, but it does help to keep the thread strong, especially with how much weaving in and out that I'm doing. But not necessary, and I did not do that today for this thread. I'm sorry for not seeing your comments, by the way. I'm doing this on my phone, so I only see the comments if I'm looking at it right when the comment comes through, because for some reason the comments don't want to stay up on the screen, which is a little bit annoying. YouTube should fix that. In the past, I've done live streams on my laptop, but I don't really like my webcam camera quality. That's not to say that I know anything about what the quality on my phone looks like right now, much less what it sounds like. But I will say that, yes, it is very relaxing sometimes. I get kind of anxious when I do the same thing over and over again. It's like something in my brain saying that there's something wrong because I'm doing the same motion over and over again. But historically, when they used to do it back in the old days. Beeswax, I don't really know a lot about the history. I do have a book on the history of books, but I haven't gotten that far into it. So historically, I'm not sure what they've used. I would think beeswax, because it would have been an easier wax to use, a little bit more plentiful, and I know that that's was commonly used today for waxing thread. So yes, I'd say beeswax. Don't take me at my word for historical purposes, but at least today, I know most people will use beeswax. I think it's not that much different from leather working in terms of how the thread is treated. What's interesting is if you go on Amazon and look for like a bookbinding kit, a lot of times you get the same tools that you get in leather work. That's not to say that those are necessarily the proper tools for official bookbinding. I think more people work with leather than do professional bookbinding, so those kits are just more readily available and cheaper to produce. And again, that's also not saying that you have quality materials from those, but I guess if you're just getting started, you want to throw 20 bucks at something, it works. I did it. I forgot to loop under again. I keep doing that. So we are getting very close. I just have one more signature and then my last waste papers to sew on once I do this one. So it's taken me a little over an hour, I think. And that's for 15 signatures in a hot mess of a weird Coptic kettle French. I don't know what stitch this is. It really isn't French. French would be more of a looping across than a looping directly under. That made absolutely no sense. But it makes sense because that is what they had available. Yeah. Yeah, beeswax would have been probably the easiest wax to have on hand that would work with paper. Although back on that wax thing, I wonder, and I probably have the answers in the book that I have on books. Yeah, leather bindings. Leather bindings are very common. What gets interesting, I'm jumping all over the place because of comments. There's different kinds of leather that get used, and goatskin leather is actually kind of the preferred, but I think it was cowskin leather that was cheaper, but it's less archival quality. I think I might have it completely mixed up. It might be goatskin leather that's less archival quality. So you see a lot of older leather books that were produced cheaply that are just sort of falling apart now, which is sad, but nothing really lasts forever, not even historical documents. I think it's goatskin leather that falls apart faster, but it's preferred because it's a little bit thinner and easier to work with, whereas cowskin leather usually comes in a lot thicker. Again, I could be completely backwards. But now back on the wax thing, I wonder at what point we realize that wax helps the thread. And that's probably a question that I could Google, but I'm in the middle of sewing right now. Now, also back on that leather binding thing, I think that's another reason why books were so expensive. I mean, you spend as much time as we are, and this isn't even a printed book, because you figure printers weren't really a thing until much later, so books would have had to been completely handmade, from making the paper to basically hand writing the whole book. Hand painting, hand gilding, all of that, and then sitting here and binding it together. So it makes sense that, one, it would have kind of a nicer cover, because like you don't want to spend all of that time putting this thing together and then it's in a really just kind of trashy looking cover. But then it also makes sense why it's so expensive, because how much time and work went into it. So it's cool that books have become such an accessible thing now, where I can go and buy any old paperback for 50 cents at my local thrift store. It's also cool just for this hobby that, like, I am living a way, kind of living through history, acting with history, I guess. I don't know, it's just really cool. It makes sense in my little nerdy brain. Alright, so we're going to do the last waist sheet, and then we can tie off the binding. And what's nice is I did this whole thing with one strain of thread. Which again, there's nothing wrong with having too little thread because you can just tie in more, but I like not having to do that. Oh, come on, come through. There we go. I made a knot. Didn't want to make a knot. Okay. Final little bit, and it's going to take me half an hour to do, apparently. All right. Weave this underneath. I had to leave her a bit bent back to see the finished product. We're almost done with the sewing. We're not quite to the finished product yet, but we will be eventually. And I will try to make this live stream public after the fact. YouTube defaults it to private for people with less than 1,000 subscribers. For some reason, I don't know, safety something, I guess. But I will see if I can make it public after we're done here so that you can kind of skip around, because there are points where there's nobody here and I was just talking to myself. I don't know. I don't know if people are interested in my blabbering or if you just want to see what I'm making. Either is fine with me. If you want to see what I'm making, you have to deal with my blabbering anyway. Nope, nope, nope. Okay. Alright, so last time going out, we're going to do the last wrap around. And because I want to make sure that my knots at the ends are secure, I'm going to loop around again, and I am going to pull through this loop to make a knot on the outside. And then I'm going to go back into the signature. It's really the waist page. And then I'm going to tie it off on the inside by going underneath my last stitch, pulling through the loop, and tying that off. And I'm going to do that one more time to make a double. And then I'm going to weave it underneath just to hold the thread down. And cut off my excess. If I make a small book, I have enough thread here that I could do like a saddle stitch or something. So now I'm done with the thread, and I can throw this knot here. And now we have a finished text block. Yay! That only took like an hour and a half. But now I'm going to grab my cover, which is now mostly dry. Yeah, it's completely dry. So this is what it looks like. It originally had a green book cloth on it. That book cloth is still there. Yeah. So now the moment of truth, because I didn't pay attention to the size of my spine, but it fits pretty nicely in that original spine. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be gluing the end pages down inside of the cover, and that will hold the text block into place. And then from there, what I will be doing is I will be gluing my pretty paper, which is not very thick, but I'll be gluing that to my waist pages. So that will hide this kind of mess of an interior binding here and here. Nope, not there, here. I said here, where I tied things off. So what I'll need to do is set it cleanly in the spine and then fold it down. And what I will be looking to make sure of in doing this, and it might help if I'm gonna unplug my phone here, if I show you real quick. So I'm setting this down in the original curvature of the spine. And I'm gonna let those waste papers fall, and I wanna make sure that it comes to the edge. Now, I'm not too concerned with this gap here because I'm going to cover this with the pretty paper later. This is for the structural integrity. This is for aesthetic. I'm not for sure that I'm gonna go with this paper at the moment. I just sort of randomly grabbed paper that I had. I'm not sure that I love it with the skulls, but we'll make that decision when we come to it. First though, what I wanna do is I have some ribbon, it's black ribbon, that I want to put onto the spine before I glue anything else down. So let's do that. I plug my phone back in so it doesn't die. That would be tragic. So I don't know how that angle works. Kind of move that out of the way. So it's not a great angle, but you can kind of see what's going on here. So I'm going to want enough ribbon to kind of run down the spine so that it doesn't run away, and then enough additional that it can go anywhere in the book. So probably about that much. And then I'm going to cut this at somewhat of an angle. Nope, not like that. There we go. It's not super pretty, but I'm going to go grab a lighter. I'm going to just lightly burn this just so that it doesn't go unraveling on me later. So give me 1 second and I will be right back. So this is a torch of a lighter, but it should work. Let me just light this around all of this paper. I just need to burn it just a little bit, just so that it's not fraying on the end. So I'm done with this. And I want to make sure I like this as my front cover, so I think this way will be up. So I'm just going to mark that real quick so I'm not going back and forth on that. And then I also have a decision to make if I want the shiny part out or the satin kind of matte part out. I think the matte part will glue down the best, so that's probably what I'm going to go with. So real quick, I need to grab my glue brush one more time. And I'm breaking out my PVA once again. Don't need that much glue. And I'm just going to take this, kind of run it down the spine and along the fabric a little bit. And try to keep it as straight as I can. We are not striving for perfection here. And it'll set kind of right on the edge of where the fabric at the bottom is laying. The thing with glue is I just sort of rub my hands and it sort of pearls up so I don't have glue stuck on my hand. And then I leave it a little bit loose at the top so that it has that space to sort of fold over. So there's that. One other thing that I want to do is take just a scrap of paper and we're going to reinforce the spine. And it's going to be kind of like what we saw when we first opened this up, where there's that paper that had the text on it, which was really weird and random. But so I'm just going to cut this to fit within where the fabric is laying. And this will help to keep the ribbon down, as well as, I'm already gluing it down, as well as help to sort of reinforce all of what we have laying down. It also helps to sort of level all of this out. So you don't need a lot of glue. You just need enough to sort of fill the area right up to the edges of the fabric. This is really just kind of a random bit of reinforcement here. And we lay that down. And that will hold that down. So now the thing that we gotta be careful about is the ribbon, so we're not getting glue on the visible part of the ribbon. I guess the last little bit of mess we need to make. No, I don't really need to reinforce that, do I? I'm going to go ahead and glue the spine. So this will just sort of help to reinforce everything. Where is my binder clip? So I will say normally when I use binder clips on a text block, I will use an extra sheet or two of paper to sort of pad it, but because I have the waist pages here, I'm not super concerned about it. I will also say that if I were doing this for somebody else, if this were not on a live stream, I would be doing this over the course of probably a couple days, letting the glue cure, especially on the spine. But this is literally just for me, and I'm really not too concerned with this falling apart. The adhesive is really just an added bond for everything. It keeps the thread together. It keeps the outside pages of each signature together. Obviously, each signature is multiple pages, so it does nothing for the other 3 pages on each signature, but it does help the pages on the outside have something to kind of stick together. And we're just going to do kind of a thin layer. Again, if I was taking this a little bit more seriously, taking a little bit more time, I would probably get some cloth, like a linen cloth, to run over the spine to really help hold everything together. But I am not doing that today. The thing is, you know what I'm talking about because I'm telling you all of the things that I'm not doing that I should probably technically be doing. Hi there, this is my first live stream with you. See. So somebody's asking about the glue. So PVA is actually a fairly standard glue in bookbinding. I use it a lot more than I think a professional bookbinder does, because professional bookbinders will use something called paste, which is different from glue. Paste is a little bit more, and they'll use more of a starch-based paste, which is a little bit more reactive to water, so it's something that you can kind of undo, whereas glue, you really cannot undo glue. Once it's dry, it's there. If you try to remove it, you're going to damage whatever you're removing it from. Paste, you can kind of undo it without doing significant damage. At least that's my understanding of it. It gets a little expensive to buy it, and I don't really have the time to make it, because if I were to spend the time making it, that would take away the time that I would otherwise spend bookbinding. I'm not a professional bookbinder. I have made books for people, and I know a lot of the areas where I am doing things that a professional would probably scoff at. But it is what it is. But PVA is good for bookbinding in the fact that it is pH neutral, so it's not going to break down the paper. The main complication with PVA is it does yellow as it ages. So when we first ripped this book apart, you may have noticed when I showed you the adhesive that was yellowing, it was probably a PVA. Honestly, if you're just doing this as a hobby like I am, any glue will work. You could even go so far as to say using Elmer's school glue. The issue with Elmer's is that it is very watered down, and they really do not publicize what kind of glue that they are. It's theorized that they are a kind of PVA, but again, very watered down. So in a stretch, it could work. It's not something that you would want to use if you were trying to be professional. So yes, I am using PVA glue. And then the person saying this is probably the first live stream. It's because I haven't done very many live streams. This is, I think, only my second live stream doing bookbinding. A few years ago, I tried to do live streams. I think it was during NaNoWriMo, because I was trying to do NaNoWriMo, but I'm not great at making and keeping habits under pressure. I'm hoping that since I've been writing every night, that this year NaNoWriMo will go smoothly, but I'm also not holding myself to it. So what I'm going to do is I am going to tear down on my waste sheets. Let me back up. So at the beginning, I had 2 pieces of paper that became my waste sheets, and they're on the front and the back. What I'm going to do real quick is I am going to tear down the first most outward of my waste sheets, and this will create somewhat of a step ladder so that it's not super thick where the papers are going to be laying. So main thing I'm going to do, I'm going to just sort of fold this down in half. And it doesn't need to be perfect for me. And then I'm just going to rip it. So this way when this lays down, I will have kind of this half sheet and then the full sheet that lays down. And then something else I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it down kind of from the crease of the spine, if I can here. And I'm not doing anything precisely. I'm not measuring this. Again, it's really just to sort of create those levels so that it's not just like a really thick layer of paper, because this is really just to hold the text block to the cover. Alternatively, if I were doing this differently, if I weren't using a pre-made book, I could just glue the spine directly to the cover. The issue with that is it doesn't always lay very flat. Whereas when you do it with this method, you can lay it pretty well flat because the spine of the text block will separate from the spine of the cover itself. So it's helpful. So it's not pretty, but that's what I have with my first waste sheet. And then my second waste sheet, I will leave pretty much as is. So it will sit like this. And these 2 sheets will be what will be laying in the cover. And then what I will also do is take my last 2 waste sheets before my first signature, and I will paste them together at the edges so that it creates a nice thick layer of paper, because then what I'll do is when I figure out what nice paper that I want, because I don't want just a white end paper, I can glue that all together. So I'm going to lay my spine in the spine of my cover, line it up how I want it. My chair is very creaky. I am up to 3 people watching. Hello, everybody. Right now I'm a little crooked here. So just make sure it's lined up how I want it. And then I'm going to fold the spine over. And then I'm going to take my paste, not my paste, my glue. Using too many technical terms here, losing track of what I'm saying. And I'm going to glue this down. So this is the first waist sheet. I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap on it. So I'm really just gluing from the edge. I'm not going all the way down to the spine. And this will give me a little bit of added flexibility. So once again, make sure I'm lined up. And then I'm going to lay that waist sheet down. And because PVA is a little bit wet, this first waist sheet is going to get a little bit wrinkly. That's just because I didn't take the time to really make it flat. And it's fine because we are doing the leveling and there are going to be so many layers over top of it that it's not going to make a big difference. And again, I'm not selling this. This is for me, so it doesn't really matter. So now that that's there, I'm going to go ahead and tear away part of the waist sheet on the back side, and I'm going to do the same thing where I fold it in half-ish. Make that crease. I'm going to fold it back. I could take scissors, but again, we're not going for perfection. We're not necessarily going for clean. If anything, the rough edges will help a little bit to disguise what's going on. And we're just going to kind of rip this off. This one didn't go quite as smoothly, but it's fine. And then I'm going to fold from the spine corner in to create somewhat of an edge. That made no sense. I don't know what my words are. So then what I'm going to be doing to close this off, I'm going to glue this waist page and then I'm going to close the book. So take my glue once again. Got a little hiccup there. And we're mostly going to focus that on the edge. Not quite going down to the spine. We're going to bring this up and over. And then kind of press it down. We're getting there. Well, if it sticks, it's got to stick for us to get there. It doesn't want to stick. Okay. I'm just going to take my bone folder and press this down. This will also help to spread some glue because I did have some clops that weren't quite weren't quite working for me. Okay. So what I want to do real quick while I'm waiting for that is I do have this little piece of felt. And what I want to do is I want to make a little bit of a pen holder. So I'm going to kind of figure out where my pages end. And I think this will actually work better on the front, just with the way that I have my pages cut. So I'm gonna line this up. Oh, probably right about there. I'm gonna glue the piece of felt down. And most of this felt will get covered aside from the part that's holding the pen, so I'm not horribly concerned about the glue showing. And again, this will just be a little pen holder. Just a little detail so that I can kind of keep my pen with my book, because the journal that I'm currently using has an elastic strap that I usually hook my pen into. I don't have that, so I'm going to have a pen holder. So I'm going to press that down. I'm going to go ahead and add some more glue because I didn't put enough down. I just want that to kind of press in. I'm good with it absorbing through because I'm going to be gluing felt onto felt. So I want this fabric to absorb the glue, which was an issue that we didn't want earlier when we were gluing fabric onto the cover. Yeah. So this is the point where I am very much winging what I am doing, because I have not done a pen holder before. And I probably could have used the same fabric that the rest of this was made out of. The issue is it's more of a cotton, so it's, unless I were to sew it together, and it would have frayed over time. So I need my pen. Well, thank you. I just want to make sure that I have plenty of space to put the pen. And I'm pressing down, and as I'm pressing down, the glue is absorbing into the felt. And there's a little bit of a waiting game because I need the glue to dry a little bit. Before it will really start to stick down. But in the meantime, I can double check my alignment. I can flip my book closed, and that'll sit pretty nicely. So while I'm waiting for that to dry down, I can go ahead and start pasting down, gluing down my secondary waist sheet. So I'm going to take this right up to the spine and all the way up to the edges. And then obviously get it through the center because you want it to hold down really well. I gotta be careful that I'm not putting it on too thick because PVA is a very wet glue, and it can warp the paper because this is just copy paper, so it's not very thick. Try not to drip glue everywhere. So then I can take this waist sheet and sort of flip it down, and it will overlap on that felt and help to hold that down. And then I want to do the same thing on the back cover. I'm gluing right up. Let me actually flip you around so you can kind of see what I'm doing better. I'm gluing right up to the spine. I don't want it to be too thick in an area for too long because it is very damp. But then I'm going right up to the edges. You can see how this is already warping here. But right along the edges. I will also note that copy paper, if you are trying to be a professional bookbinder, not the best option, simply because it is the wrong kind of grain for this project. Because typically you would want your grain to, I'm trying to remember. I don't really remember. I think in copy paper, the grain goes long ways on the paper, and you would want more of a short grain. That way the grain is working with the paper. It's one of those things that I don't really pay attention to because the work that I do with bookbinding hasn't really required me to focus on paper grain. But you can see it's not very pretty right now, but that is okay because we will be layering another paper over this. So this is where we are at right now. So we have our pen cover, and I'm going to sit here with my bone folder and I'm going to try to flatten this out. So the other thing with paper, when it's wet, it stretches. And that's part of why the grain is important, because when you're gluing, the paper gets very wet, obviously, and you want it to stretch in certain directions. Otherwise, it can just end up tearing. In my case right now, again, it doesn't matter. I'm making this for me. I'm not selling this to anybody, so what I'm making works. And the stretch is also helpful in this case because I'm able to sort of conform the paper to the felt, so it sort of encompasses it rather than having that kind of gape around it. There's going to be obviously a little bit of that gape, but for the most part it's sort of landing in that little nook, which is nice. And I just ripped my paper a little bit, but we are going to be covering that up, so it will be fine. So this is where we are at right now after 183 minutes. I have a redesigned cover made out of an old book cover, 15 signature text block with the waste sheets that we will be working through in a moment. And then I have my ribbon so I can kind of keep track of where I am at. This was something that I really wanted out of the book that I currently have that it doesn't have, so that's that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look through my papers, figure out what I want to do for my end papers, because I'm not really feeling this blue with the skulls. It just doesn't really feel like it matches up for me. So I'm probably going to grab like a scrapbook paper and see how that does. So, yeah. Let's take a look at the mess that is my papers. Because I have paper all over the room. I have these here. Not really sure that I'm loving the pattern. No. Those are a little too girly for the skulls, I think. don't know. Not really sure if I'm feeling the watercolor either. Well, those are empty white sheets. No, there's more color on the back. Okay. I mean, that's kind of nifty. Maybe. This one's falling apart because it was glued on the side and not... Wait. Okay. That's a little too bright and yellow. That's probably going to be a little too bright and colorful too. I know. So I have spider webs. But I think in this mess, I also have this paper sack. I kind of like the moths. I only have one of the red, that burgundy one. This is just scraps from a previous project. The blue could be fun. But I also feel like I might go with the black. We'll go with this one. Well, what did I just do? Okay. You got bubbles for a moment. Okay. I have filters now, apparently. That's fun. Bubbles. Okay. What? Okay. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it just slightly smaller than the cover and then over to the waste paper. So I need to find my ruler again, right here. So on the front, I'm actually going to need to make it a bit smaller than I originally anticipated because of how thick the felt is here. So I'm probably just going to bring it slightly above the edge of my waste paper, just to cover that, and then we'll bring it to the edge of this one. So the height will be the same, and then it'll just be based on the width. So I'm looking at a little over 8 inches. It's like 8 inches, 8 1/8 inch. So that's what we're working with. I have my handy dandy paper slicer / scoreboard that I'm gonna trim this out on. See, my height was about 7 inches, right? Yeah, just a little over 7 inches. Okay, so I need to figure out which way I want to orient my pattern. Move all of my mess around. What am I doing? Okay, how do you clean the brush? Water? Yes. Wrong way. I am breaking everything. I'm having all of the technical difficulties. Yes, I usually just clean the brush with water. This is my designated glue brush, so if it stays a mess, it's fine. It is a tough bristle brush, so it's always going to be a little bit tough, and I am okay with that. There are times I have forgotten completely to wash it, and it's bounced back fine. So, let me triple check my measurements here. Yes. Yes. So 8 1/8. 8 1/8. So I just run my finger along the score on the board, and then we slice. And now I have a scrap. I'm just gonna triple check this before I make my other cut that this will work. And it will, yay. So then I need to trim this down to the height of the book, sorry. Which is gonna be 7 1/4-ish. We'll go with 7 1/4, and then we can trim it down from there. Line that up, make sure it's straight. Make sure it's straight, okay. And slice. And this is what we have. Just like that. So what I need to do before I glue this down is I want to glue my last 2 waste papers together so that they are nice and thick and reinforced. And then I will also cut out my back end page. It might be ever so slightly different measurements just because I wasn't super precise with my trimming initially, if you'll remember from the beginning of the stream. So I still have some glue on the end of my brush that I'm just going to do a light little run over, maybe, geez. I don't need a thick layer of glue, I just need enough to sort of glue those 2 sheets together. And then I will take my end page and what I will do is I will actually glue it to the edge of the loose waste paper. So this end page waste paper that I have here, I will glue it to the edge of that and then I will work my way down. So break out my glue. I'm just going to glue right along the edge here. And line this up in the corners. And then smooth her down. And then I'm also going to take it right here in the spine. I'm going to go a little bit thicker on the glue. I want to make this a little bit damp because that will make it easier to fold the paper and make the crease without damaging the design. It also helps on the waxed thread because wax doesn't really hold glue very well. So we're going to bring this down. I'm going to go ahead and grab my bone folder. And I know you can't really see what I'm doing here, but I'm running my bone folder into the crease here. Just to kind of help that page be able to fold it smoother. I'm going to wiggle a little bit because it's not just a flat crease. There's a little bit of, I'll say there's more of a curve than a 90-degree angle that it needs to take. And then we'll finish it off by gluing all the way down to the end. What I'm doing is I'm going on the edge of the sheet itself, just because that's easier than trying to figure out where exactly it's going to land on the cover. Because even though I measured, it may not be perfectly exact. And then I'm just going to bring that down, break out my bone folder, and sort of press it down. This also helps me get rid of any glue that pushes out, like right here. And make sure that that gets cleaned up. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to take a couple sheets of copy paper and I'm just going to set them in here. And this will help to absorb any moisture that comes out from the glue while it's drying. So it kind of keeps the glue from going everywhere. And what I'm actually also going to do, take a couple more sheets of copy paper and slice it in between, maybe. My end paper and my first paper of my text block. Again, that just sort of helps to absorb all of the moisture so that it's not seeping all over the place. So I'm going to check my measurements one more time and do my back end pages. So this one's a little bit bigger. This is at the full 8.5 inches by about 7.25. So I'm going to paste these two end pages together right along the edge. Alright, so I'm going to be doing the same thing on the back cover that I did on the front, but I'm currently out of time. Bum, bum, bum. So, just as sort of a recap, this is what I have for my end page. Looks pretty nifty. And then it folds in, so this is a nice thick piece right here. And then I get my unlined pages. I will probably go through and clean up some of these that got a little nipped up. But this is where we're at. I'm going to do the same thing on the back. And then I think we'll be done. So thank you for following me through this little journey. And we'll see you next time. Bye.